Right now, beneath the stillness of your room, your throat may carry a quiet, heavy ache that has nothing to do with physical illness. It is the weight of everything you chose to swallow today, the boundaries you folded away to keep the peace, and the truths you held back because you feared the storm an honest word might cause. Perhaps you are lying perfectly still, yet inside your mind, 100 unsaid sentences are pacing the floor. You might feel a subtle, stubborn knot right behind your collarbones, or a tightness in your jaw that refuses to let go even when the lights are turned low. You have spent hours smoothing over the sharp edges of the world around you, acting as the quiet cushion for everyone else's moods. And now your own mind is paying the price in restlessness. The day has ended, but the unspoken text messages, the swallowed disagreements, and the quiet self-erasures are still echoing through your thoughts. Let the cool night air move softly across your skin, and notice the exact texture of the sheet resting against your ankles. The mattress beneath you is completely solid, bearing your entire weight without requiring a single effort from your muscles. You do not have to hold yourself up anymore. Outside, the distant hum of the evening is fading into the dark, leaving only the immediate safe space of this bed. If it feels right, let your hands rest gently wherever they naturally fall, perhaps flat against the mattress or loosely over your stomach. There is no need to prepare for another conversation tonight, and no one is waiting for you to say the right thing. The world is no longer demanding your compliance or your smile. You are not failing because your mind is crowded, and this physical heaviness is not a sign that you are broken. You have simply spent a long time trying to build an outer sanctuary by dynamic suppression. And tonight, we are not going to force those hidden feelings to vanish. We are not going to demand that you suddenly become fearless or perfectly expressive. Instead, we are simply going to create a safe, unexamined space where the need to manage other people's comfort can drop away entirely. It is a strange paradox of the human heart that we often run from honest expression, because we think silence is a safe harbor. We tell ourselves that by keeping our thoughts locked inside, we are protecting our relationships and preserving our inner calm. Yet, as Buddhist wisdom gently reminds us, a peace that depends entirely on your self-erasure is not peace at all. It is merely a slow, exhausting stagnation. The mind does not become tranquil because you successfully dam the currents of your own reality. It becomes peaceful when you stop treating your authentic voice as a danger to be buried. Think for a moment about how much energy it takes to keep a secret from yourself, or to push down an absolute truth when it tries to rise to the surface. We often believe that letting go means clearing the mind of all difficult thoughts. But true letting go begins when we stop spending our life force trying to hide what we actually feel. You might have walked through years of your life believing that your value lies in how little space you take up, or how perfectly you can absorb the friction of the people around you. Maybe you have felt this too, this quiet, exhausting belief that if you show your true boundaries, the world you love will crumble. Tonight, you do not have to clear the channels of your life in a single evening. You do not have to resolve the long, complicated histories of what was left unsaid, or force your relationships to suddenly change right now. It is completely enough to let the heavy sand of the day begin to settle toward the bottom of the well. We are simply going to sit by the edge of your inner landscape, letting the breath act as a gentle, patient element that requires nothing from you but its own natural movement. You can allow the tension in your throat to just be there, without trying to fix it or figure it out before you sleep. In a moment, an ancient story will show us something even quieter about this hidden weight. It is a story about a place where the water stopped moving, not because the sky forgot how to rain, but because the earth forgot how to let its deep streams breathe. As you lie here, notice the tiny automatic rise of your chest with every inhalation. You do not have to direct the breath, and you do not have to make it deep or spiritual. Just observe how it enters the nostrils, cool and light, and how it leaves the body, slightly warmer, carrying away the immediate exhaustion of the last few hours. The tightness you carry in your face, the small clenching around your eyes, and the pressure in your forehead are all parts of the protective wall you built during the day. You can leave that wall exactly as it is for now. You do not even have to tear it down. The simple awareness that the wall exists is the very first step toward finding the open sky again. We often carry our unspoken words like heavy stones in an invisible pack, carrying them from one room to the next, wondering why our shoulders feel so old and tired. We look at our lives and think we are exhausted by our work or our schedules, when we are actually exhausted by the constant vigilance of keeping our true selves hidden away. Every time we smile when we want to say no, every time we agree to preserve a fragile harmony, we add another grain of fine silt to the quiet streams of our consciousness. Over time, the silt becomes thick, the water slows down, and the mind begins to feel heavy, dark, and crowded. But the deep water within you has not disappeared. It is simply waiting for the pressure to be lifted. It does not require an earthquake to clear the path. It only requires a willingness to stop adding more stones to the channel. Let your body sink just a fraction deeper into the fabric of your bed, allowing the night to envelop you completely. You have arrived at a place where your silence does not need to be a shield, and your words do not need to be a weapon. You are safe enough to let the world carry itself for a few hours, while you simply return to the rhythmic, effortless movement of your own life moving in the dark. In a high valley where the mountains curve inward like the palm of a protective hand, there lived a young monk named Sora. He was known throughout the mountain province for his unshakable helpfulness, his gentle manners, and his ability to quiet any argument between the villagers. Whenever an elder spoke with anger, Sora would bow, absorb the harshness, and smile to ensure the friction went no further. If the younger monks complained about the long, cold hours of the morning chores, Sora would quietly take their heavy wooden buckets from them, working until his palms were raw so that everyone else might remain comfortable. The temple was peaceful on the surface, and the abbot often praised the young man for his perfect, uncomplaining nature. But as the seasons turned, something strange began to happen to Sora. His breathing grew shallow, and a tight, lingering ache settled into the base of his throat, right behind his collarbones. At night, while the other monks slept deeply, Sora would lie beneath his thin quilt, his eyes wide in the darkness. His mind would repeat the day's conversations over and over, turning every swallowed sentence into a small, exhausting storm. He felt as though he were carrying an invisible, heavy mountain inside his own rib cage. The more he tried to smooth over the feelings of others, the more crowded and suffocating his own inner world became. He began to look at the bright blue sky and feel absolutely nothing but a dull, heavy fatigue. One year, a silent drought fell upon the mountain valley. The summer rains came as they always did, darkening the earth and filling the stone basins. Yet the great plum orchard at the edge of the temple grounds began to wither. The leaves curled up into brittle brown paper, and the fruit dropped before it could ripen. The soil on the surface was wet from the afternoon showers, but the trees were dying from the roots up. The abbot, deeply concerned for the valley, sent for an elder hydrologist named Master Jaon. This old man lived alone near the high rocky crags, and he was known for his rare ability to read the hidden movements of the earth. He did not look like a great scholar. He had calloused hands, a weathered face, and eyes that seemed to look right through the illusions of the world. When Master Jian arrived at the withered orchard, he did not look at the branches or test the wet mud at the surface. He carried only a single, long piece of hollow bamboo reed, dried by the sun until it was pale gold. Sora was assigned to assist the old man, carrying his small leather pouch of iron spikes. They walked between the rows of dying trees, the dry twigs snapping beneath their straw sandals. The silence between them was thick, but Sora, true to his habit, tried desperately to fill it with polite words. He asked about the weather, apologized for the steepness of the mountain path, and asked if the old man needed a cup of water, masking his own internal exhaustion with a bright, helpful voice. Master John stopped by a large, ancient tree whose trunk was split by age. He looked at Sora, his eyes completely calm, and did not answer the polite questions. Instead, he knelt down on the damp earth, pressing one end of the pale bamboo reed firmly against the gray stones at the base of the root system. He placed his ear against the open top of the hollow reed, closing his eyes in deep concentration. The old man stayed there for a long time, perfectly still, listening to something that no one else could see or hear. Sora stood above him, feeling a familiar tightness creeping into his jaw. He wanted to speak, to offer help, to assure the old man that he was doing a wonderful job. But something about Master John's absolute stillness made him hold his tongue. After several minutes, the old man opened his eyes, looked up at the young monk, and tapped the stone ground with his finger. He handed the hollow bamboo reed to Sora, gesturing for him to kneel. The ground felt cold against Sora's knees as he lowered his body. He took the pale wood, pressed it against the dark stone exactly where the old man had pointed, and placed his ear to the opening. At first he heard nothing but the rush of his own blood and the distant whisper of the wind through the dead leaves. But as he forced his mind to become quiet, a low, deep vibration traveled up through the hollow chamber of the reed. It was a dark, muffled sound, like water trapped deep inside a heavy stone room, thumping against the rock but unable to break free. It sounded like an angry heartbeat, congested and confined, vibrating with intense hidden pressure. Sora looked up, his ears still pressed to the wood. He told the master that he could hear the water, but it sounded trapped and heavy, far beneath the surface. He wondered why the water could not reach the roots when the rains were so frequent. Master Jian took the bamboo reed back. Running his old fingers along its smooth, hollow side, he explained that many years ago the farmers had built high stone walls to protect the surface soil from shifting. They thought that by locking the earth in place, they would create a permanent safety for the trees. But beneath the stone, the fine river silt had no way to wash away with the seasons. Grain by grain, the microscopic sand had packed itself into the subterranean channels, forming an invisible, solid shelf of mud right above the deep springs. The water was still there, full of life and strength, but it was completely dammed by the packed silt. The rain from the sky could not penetrate the shelf, and the deep spring could not rise to feed the roots. The orchard was dying of thirst, even while sitting right on top of an abundant ancient river. The old man stood up, looking at the young monk's pale, tired face. He pointed the bamboo reed directly at Sora's chest, right where the knot of tension lived. He noted that the earth cannot breathe when its deepest channels are packed with stone to maintain a pretty surface. He asked Sora what kind of silt he was keeping inside his own channel, and what he was trying to protect by remaining so beautifully silent. The question hit Sora like a physical blow, landing directly in the center of his heavy chest. He did not answer, because the tightness in his throat immediately doubled. He felt a sudden, terrifying wave of heat rise behind his eyes, a feeling he had not allowed himself to experience in many years. He realized, with a rush of profound recognition, that the muffled, thumping sound of the trapped water beneath the stone was the exact sound of his own life. It was the sound of every honest word he had buried, every boundaries he had refused to state, and every drop of anger he had hidden away to keep the temple looking peaceful. He had packed his own throat with the fine silt of compliance, and now his inner spirit was withering from the roots up. Master Jian did not offer a grand solution, nor did he tell Sora to go out and scream his anger to the mountains. He simply turned back toward the path, his pale bamboo reed tucked beneath his arm, leaving the young monk kneeling alone on the damp earth. Sora stayed there as the twilight began to fall, his hands resting on the cold stones, listening to the silent orchard. The lesson was not yet fully clear, and the dam inside his chest was still firmly in place. But for the very first time in his life, he was no longer pretending that the heaviness was a sign of peace. He knew the water was there, and he knew it was trapped. In a moment, this story will show us something even quieter about the nature of our own hidden channels. As you lie in the stillness of your own room, let the image of that hollow bamboo reed rest gently in your awareness. You may feel the same heavy, muffled vibration inside your own life, the accumulation of days or years spent holding back the truth of who you are. The realization can feel uncomfortable at first, like the sudden crack of dry wood in a silent forest. But notice that Master John did not judge the earth for being blocked, and he did not blame the trees for withering. He simply looked for the channel. You do not have to blame yourself tonight for the walls you have built to stay safe. The walls were constructed out of a desire for protection. But tonight, the reed is simply showing us where the water waits. This old mountain parable is not an invitation to turn your heart into stone, nor does it ask you to become indifferent to the people you love. Buddhist wisdom never demands that we erase our natural feelings or become cold, unfeeling entities who walk through life without preference or warmth. When we talk about finding an unobstructed inner landscape, we are looking for a far gentler way of existing. The tragedy of the withered plum orchard was not that the deep water existed, but that its natural movement was blocked by layers of artificial restraint. The suffering you feel at night does not come from the fact that you possess deep emotions, strong boundaries, or valid truths. The exhaustion arises from the immense, invisible labor of holding those currents down, compressing them into the dark corners of your subconscious, just to ensure that the surface of your life remains undisturbed. When the ancient teachings speak of attachment, they are describing the tight, panicking grip that tells you a situation must go exactly your way, or you will not be safe. In our modern lives, this often manifests as a desperate need to control how other people view us. We become deeply attached to the image of being the peaceful one, the accommodating one, or the person who never causes trouble. This craving for external validation turns into a heavy anchor. We start checking the faces of others for any sign of disapproval, adjusting our posture, tuning our voice, and swallowing our honest reactions. We mistake this constant shape-shifting for kindness. We tell ourselves we are keeping the peace, but we are actually accumulating a mountain of fine silt, blocking the very channels that allow our true spirit to breathe. One of the greatest insights of the Buddha was that human pain is rarely a single, simple event. There is the initial discomfort life brings, which is like the natural drying of the soil during a hot season. But then the mind adds a second layer of distress through its own internal reactions. We take the original friction, the moment we felt hurt or dismissed, and we build a massive dam around it. We spend hours replaying the scene, thinking about what we should have said or blaming ourselves for feeling upset in the first place. This second layer of suffering is what truly exhausts the heart. The original wound was just a passing shadow, but our choice to bury it, to deny its existence, turns it into a permanent weight beneath the stones. True mindfulness is the simple, gentle capacity to observe this internal clogging without immediately judging yourself for it. It is like holding that golden bamboo reed against your own chest and simply listening to the vibration. When an anxious thought arises, or when a wave of unspoken resentment starts to stir, mindfulness allows you to notice it without being swept away by its current. You do not have to obey the thought, and you do not have to fight it. You just sit on the bank of the stream and watch the sand move. You begin to see that a thought is just a momentary clouding of the water, a brief event in the mind that will settle on its own if you stop stirring the pool with your anxiety. Letting go does not mean you abandon the people in your life, or that you stop caring about harmony. It means you drop the exhausting illusion that you are solely responsible for managing the emotional weather of everyone around you. You stop trying to be the barrier that absorbs every shockwave. When you let go, you are simply allowing the river's silt of old habits to wash away naturally, trusting that your authentic self is strong enough to handle whatever truth brings. You realize that a relationship built on your absolute silence is not a true connection. It is a fragile structure built on shifting sand. By letting the hidden water rise, you allow honesty to clear the air, even if it creates a brief ripple on the surface. This is where the mind begins to soften. We often treat our inner peace as a fragile crystal glass that will shatter if someone speaks harshly or if a conflict occurs. But true awareness is more like a vast, deep lake. A rock can be thrown into it, creating a splash and a series of wide ripples, but the deep water underneath remains completely unshaken. The lake does not fight the rock, and it does not try to hold the ripples in place. It simply allows the movement to happen, knowing its own depth will absorb the impact and return to stillness in its own time. You contain that exact same depth within you right now, beneath the heavy layers of the day's fatigue. Compassion, in the light of Zen wisdom, is not a shield you use to protect others from your truth. True compassion is the courage to meet your own suffering with an open hand, refusing to turn your self-awareness into a weapon of self-punishment. If you have spent years hiding your boundaries, smiling through your discomfort, or playing the role of the silent fixer, you do not need to hate yourself for that pattern tonight. The silt accumulated because you were trying to survive. trying to keep yourself safe in a world that felt unpredictable. You can look at that inner blockage with a sense of gentle gratitude for how hard it tried to protect you, while softly recognizing that you no longer need to live behind a dam. The nature of all things is impermanence, which means that the tightness in your throat is not a permanent fixture of your being. It is a temporary accumulation of energy, a shelf of sand that can be dissolved by the steady, patient movement of your breath. The thoughts that are currently pacing through your mind, the worries about tomorrow's conversations, the regrets about today's silences, they are all fluid things. They only appear solid because you are gripping them so tightly in the dark. The moment you open your fist, the moment you allow the space around the thoughts to expand, they begin to lose their density, turning back into harmless mist. Slowly, the teaching becomes personal. You begin to see that the home you have been searching for is not a place where everyone agrees with you, or where you never experience friction. The home is the quiet, spacious awareness within your own chest that remains open, no matter what words are spoken or left unsaid. You do not have to fix your entire life before the morning comes, and you do not have to master the art of perfect speech tonight. It is completely enough to realize that the trapped water beneath the stone is still alive, still vibrant, and still waiting to rise. As you listen to the rhythmic rise and fall of your breath, let the language of this modern world fade away for a short while. You are not a machine that needs to be repaired, and you are not a puzzle that needs to be solved. You are simply a living landscape that has become a little congested by the weight of the journey. The night is long, the bed is supportive, and the space around you is completely uncritical. You can allow yourself to be exactly as you are, with all your unspoken thoughts and all your lingering tensions, knowing that the clear water is already working its way through the sand. Let the weight of these insights settle quietly into the room, like evening mist gathering in a quiet valley. There is absolutely nothing you need to fix about your life in this moment, and you do not have to master the art of perfect honesty before you fall asleep. Right now, your only task is to inhabit this quiet space, allowing your physical form to be completely supported by the bed beneath you. If it feels right, take a slow, unhurried breath through your nose, letting the cool night air fill the center of your chest. Feel the natural expansion behind your collarbones, a brief moment of space, and then let the breath slide away without any effort, carrying a small fraction of the day's heaviness out into the dark. You might notice that each exhalation is a natural permission slip to soften, an invitation to let go of the rigid armor you wore during the daylight hours. Perhaps we can bring our gentle awareness to the physical places where you have been storing the unspoken weight of your world. Without moving, turn your attention to the hinge of your jaw, noticing if the upper and lower teeth are pressed tightly together. This is the gatekeeper of your expression, the muscular wall that has spent hours holding back the words you chose not to speak. There is no need to judge this tightness, for it has been working hard to protect you. But if it feels right, allow the jaw to soften slightly. Let the tongue drop away from the roof of the mouth, creating a tiny, spacious distance between your teeth. Even a millimeter of release is an act of profound kindness to your nervous system. Now, move your awareness downward into the column of your throat, the very channel through which your truth travels. You might feel a subtle restriction here, a quiet knot that appears whenever you swallow an authentic boundary or hide your true feelings to keep someone else comfortable. Imagine a gentle warmth expanding across your neck, melting the edges of that knot, not by forcing it to disappear, but by giving it permission to simply exist without your resistance. You can allow this throat area to feel a little wider, a little more spacious, as if the breath could pass through it without meeting a single barrier or knot of tension. As you lie here in the stillness, a thought may arise in your mind, perhaps a memory of an unresolved conversation from today, or an anxious anticipation of a boundary you must set tomorrow. Do not push the thought away, and do not dive into it to solve the problem. Instead, try naming the emotional pattern very softly to yourself, using a quiet internal whisper. You might say to yourself, "This is the pattern of trying to protect everyone else," or "This is the fear of being rejected if I speak my truth." By naming the pattern, you take away its invisible power over you, turning a chaotic storm into a recognizable path. If it feels right, imagine that pale, golden bamboo reed from the plum orchard is resting gently in your open hands. This reed is completely hollow, light, and smoothed by the wind, designed only to listen, never to judge or demand. Picture yourself taking that single heavy thought, that unspoken sentence that has been pacing through your mind, and placing it carefully into one end of the hollow reed. You are not throwing it away in anger, and you are not forcing yourself to be cured of it. You are simply giving it a temporary home outside of your physical body, letting the bamboo hold the weight so your chest can be free. Watch what happens in your imagination as the thought rests within the hollow chamber of the wood. The reed does not bend under the weight, because truth, when given space, loses its density. Imagine a cool, crystalline stream of water beginning to trickle through the hollow tube, touching the sand of your worries. The water is gentle, patient, and persistent. It does not crash through like a violent flood, but instead flows around each grain of silt, loosening the packed sand that has kept you feeling congested for so long. You can see the dark grit beginning to separate, carried away smoothly by the clear water, moving out of the reed and dissolving into the vast dark earth below. There is no need to rush this image, and there is no pressure to make the water completely clear tonight. Even if the water in your mind feels muddy right now, even if the silt feels too thick to move, the simple act of visualizing the channel is enough. You can return to this image whenever you are ready, knowing that healing is a gradual, nonviolent uncovering, not an aggressive confrontation. The spring beneath the stone has all the time in the world, and it does not demand that you clear the path in a single evening. Let your breath return to its own completely natural rhythm, requiring absolutely no conscious direction from your mind. Notice how the abdomen rises on its own, a quiet wave of life lifting against the fabric of your clothing, and how it falls back down, sinking into the mattress. You are a living landscape, and just like the earth, your body knows how to process what is heavy if you simply stop adding more stones to the dam. You do not have to perform the role of the perfect, uncomplaining helper in this room. You are safe enough to drop the mask completely, allowing your true, tired self to be seen by the quiet awareness that lives within you. Sometimes, the mind becomes afraid that if we stop managing our thoughts, the dam will burst and we will be overwhelmed by the currents of our own life. But notice that the bed is still holding you. The room is still quiet, and you are still breathing safely in the dark. The sky outside does not ask the trees to apologize for losing their leaves in winter. And this night does not ask you to justify your boundaries or defend your silence. You are permitted to simply exist as a hollow vessel for a while, letting the breath move through you like the wind moving through the mountain crags. In a moment, another ancient story will take us even deeper into this hidden landscape. We will travel down into the foundation wells of the temple, where the old stonemason works in the absolute dark, showing us how the most stubborn blocks in our lives can be dissolved without a single blow of a hammer. But for now, stay right here by the edge of your own internal stream. Let the muscles of your shoulders drop a fraction deeper into the pillows, releasing the invisible burdens you have been carrying for the sake of others. Your hands can soften their grip, your chest can expand with a bit more ease, and your throat can remain open to the cool, quiet air of the night. You are not failing because you feel tired. You are simply a human being who has walked a long way with a heavy pack, and tonight, you have the absolute right to set the pack down on the floor and rest without earning it. The autumn arrived with a sharp, biting cold that turned the mountain moss to brittle glass. Sora continued his duties around the monastery, but the memory of the trapped water stayed with him like a constant ghost. His internal dam had not vanished, and he still found himself swallowing his words when the older monks spoke with irritation. One evening, the abbot noticed that the water levels in the lower kitchen wells had dropped to a dangerous trickle. The stone foundations of the temple were beginning to smell of stagnant rot, indicating that something deep beneath the earth was failing completely. Sora was ordered to descend into the foundation wells beneath the mountain shrine to assist the old village stonemason, a man named Omi, who spent his entire life working in the dark depths of dry stone structures. They went down by the light of a single tallow candle, descending a narrow spiral staircase carved directly into the damp limestone cliff. The air grew thick, smelling of old iron and ancient mud. At the very bottom, the cold was intense, vibrating through the stone floors. Omi was a short man, blind in one eye, with shoulders that looked as if they had been shaped by the heavy rocks he moved. In the center of the dark cavern stood the temple's ancient water system, anchored by a massive, rough-hewn limestone sluice gate covered in dark river moss. This gate was designed to control the flow of the underground currents, but it was completely jammed, frozen in place by centuries of calcified sand and heavy silt. Sora looked at the massive stone block, feeling an immediate familiar pressure in his own throat. He suggested to the mason that they should go back upstairs to gather heavy iron bars and large sledges to shatter the stone gate, or force it open by sheer weight. He believed that only a violent, massive effort could break through a blockage so old and dense. Omi did not answer immediately. He set the candle down on a dry ledge, its small flame casting long, flickering shadows against the weeping limestone walls. He reached into his leather apron and pulled out a small, flat wooden spatula, no longer than a human finger. He knelt down in the cold mud at the base of the massive sluice gate, his one good eye tracking the thin seam where the limestone met the bedrock. He did not strike the stone. Instead, he slipped the thin wooden tool into the narrowest crack, gently loosening a few tiny grains of fine wet sand. He scraped softly, almost rhythmically, allowing the grit to fall onto his palm before wiping it away on his cloth. Sora watched in total disbelief, his mind racing with impatience. He told the old mason that this method would take weeks, that the temple was starving for water right now, and that they were wasting their breath on a mountain of sand. The internal tension in Sora's chest grew hot, his jaw clenching tightly as he resisted the old man's slow, unhurried pacing. The stonemason stopped his hand for a brief second, his face remaining entirely calm in the dim light. He explained that if you hit this old gate with an iron hammer, the shockwave will shatter the stone channels, collapsing the mountain tunnels and burying the water forever. He noted that the sand is not held together by steel. It is held together by the immense pressure of the trapped water behind it. He said that you cannot fight the sand with violence. You must simply give the sand a place to fall. He told Sora that a single grain removed with patience does more work than 100 blind blows in the dark. Sora stood perfectly still in the dark cavern, the cold air filling his lungs. He looked at the tiny pile of sand at the old man's feet, and then he looked at the massive, dark pressure of the blocked gate. He realized that this was exactly how he had been treating his own heart. Every time he felt an explosion of anxiety or anger inside his mind, he tried to use a mental hammer, forcing himself to be silent, or demanding that his feelings disappear instantly through sheer willpower. He had been trying to smash his own internal landscape into compliance, and the only result was that the foundations of his spirit were rotting from the hidden moisture. Instead of retreating or arguing, Sora made a subtle shift. He did not try to become a perfect master of his emotions. In that moment, he simply knelt down in the cold mud next to Omi, taking a second small wooden tool from the apron. His hands were shaking slightly from the cold, and his mind was still screaming with a dozen doubts about tomorrow's chores. But he chose to sit directly with the uncertainty of the dark room. He focused entirely on the small immediate space right in front of him, sliding his spatula into the wet silt, removing one tiny grain of calcified sand at a time. They worked in absolute silence for hours, the only sound being the soft scrape of wood against stone and the slow, heavy exhale of their own breath creating small mists in the air. Sora noticed that as he stopped fighting the scale of the blockage, the tight knot behind his collarbones began to change. He was no longer trying to solve the problem of the entire temple's water. He was simply allowing this single moment to be what it was. Every grain of sand he cleared was an act of gentle, quiet discipline, a refusal to let the old habits of panic dictate his movements. Suddenly, a deep, hollow groan echoed through the limestone foundations. It was not the sound of breaking rock, but the smooth, heavy sliding of stone moving against stone. The removal of the fine silt had allowed the pressure behind the gate to shift, and the massive limestone block slid upward on its own, guided by the natural weight of the water. A clear, cool stream of mountain water broke through the seam, flowing effortlessly over the dark stones, filling the lower channels with a clean, rushing sound that echoed beautifully through the cavern. The water did not flood the room. It simply found its proper path, carrying the remaining silt away into the deep underground ocean below. Omi stood up, wiping his wet hands on his apron, and picked up the tallow candle without saying a single word of self-praise. Sora remained on his knees for a moment longer, watching the clear current move through the space where the blockage had been. He felt a profound, quiet realization wash over his entire body. The transformation was not a magical disappearance of his fears, but a fundamental change in how he related to the heavy things in his life. He understood now that he did not need a massive storm or a violent confrontation to clear his throat. He only needed the patience to stop defending the dam, allowing the small truths to emerge grain by grain. As they walked back up the spiral stairs toward the surface, the air grew lighter, and Sora noticed that he was breathing deeply for the very first time in many winters. His jaw was no longer locked in a permanent battle against his own voice. He was still the same monk, with the same quiet habits, but his relationship with the silence had shifted completely. He was no longer using his silence as a wall to protect others from his reality. He was using it as a spacious channel, through which his life could flow without restriction. In a moment, this story will show us something even quieter about the way we hold our modern burdens. As you rest in your bed, let the deep, resonant sound of that rushing underground water fill the quiet spaces of your awareness. You may have spent a lifetime believing that your old emotional blockages require a massive, destructive event to be healed. You might think you need to have a terrifying confrontation, or that you must completely change your personality before you can find peace. But the old stonemason reminds us that the gate opens on its own when we stop gripping the sand so tightly. You can allow the small, calcified worries of this day to be loosened gently, breath by breath, knowing that the clear current within you already knows exactly how to flow. Have you ever wondered why your mind treats an unspoken truth like a dangerous emergency? In the quiet dark of your room, it becomes easier to look beneath the surface of your patterns, examining the hidden machinery that keeps your thoughts racing while your body begs for rest. We often live under the deep illusion that if we can anticipate every conflict, map out every potential disagreement, and pre-filter our words, we can guarantee our safety. This constant state of rehearsal is actually a subtle form of violence against your own spirit. You are trying to predict the future using the fear of the past, creating an internal surveillance system that never allows the mind to settle. The mind misinterprets this vigilance as protection, convincing you that your compliance is the only thing keeping your world from breaking apart. When you look closely at this habit, you discover that it is driven by a profound resistance to uncertainty. We are terrified of what will happen if we show our true boundaries because we cannot control how other people will respond. If we speak honestly, someone might become angry, someone might pull away, or someone might judge us as difficult. To avoid this discomfort, we turn the pressure inward, using the fine silt of self-judgment to suffocate our own voice before it can even reach the air. You begin to tell yourself that your feelings are too sensitive, your boundaries are unreasonable, or your tiredness is a sign of weakness. You try to fix yourself through shame, hoping that if you punish your own heart enough, you will become the perfectly accommodating, unproblematic person the world seems to demand. Over time, this constant suppression changes from a temporary defense mechanism into a solid sense of identity. You become the one who never needs help, the helper who always understands, or the quiet presence who never creates friction. You wrap your entire sense of self around how perfectly you can absorb the discomfort of others. But this identity is a heavy, artificial stone structure built directly over a natural watercourse. The more you try to sustain this false image of constant harmony, the more detached you become from the genuine living currents of your own reality. You begin to feel hollow, numb, and deeply lonely because the person everyone else loves is just a beautifully constructed dam, while the true water is left to rot in the dark caverns below. One of the most liberating insights of Buddhist wisdom is the clear distinction between the primary pain that life naturally brings and the secondary suffering we build on top of it. Life will always contain moments of natural friction. People will misunderstand us, expectations will drop, and boundaries will naturally collide like shifting plates of earth. This initial discomfort is like a sudden summer shower that wets the ground, a passing event that belongs to the natural movement of the world. But our suffering begins when we refuse to let the water fall. We build a massive structure of judgment around that rain, asking why it had to fall on us, how we can hide the dampness from others, and what we did wrong to deserve the storm. Think of this distinction through a new image. Imagine a deep mountain canyon through which a clean river must travel to reach the valley below. The rocks along the canyon walls are the difficult moments of life, the natural boundaries and differences between you and the world. The water itself is your authentic awareness, your true feelings, and your honest voice. Now, if the river simply flows through the canyon, touching the rough stone walls as it passes, it might create a brief splash or a small eddy of foam. The water feels the shape of the rock, adapts its movement, and continues its journey toward the ocean without losing its nature. The rock does not destroy the water, and the water does not need to erase the rock. They simply meet, define each other for a brief second, and separate. Suffering occurs when the river decides that touching the stone wall is a catastrophic failure. The mind, terrified of the friction, attempts to freeze the water right at the point of contact, trying to build an artificial bridge over every single rock, so it never has to feel the contour of the canyon. You spend all your life force trying to hold the water perfectly still, preventing it from making a sound or showing a ripple. But the river cannot be frozen without losing its vitality. By resisting the natural texture of life, by trying to maintain a completely flat, silent surface, you create an immense, unnatural pressure that strains every muscle in your body and crowds every corner of your thoughts at night. Peace does not mean you find a canyon without a single rock. Peace means you become fluid enough to touch the stone without turning the contact into a tragedy. This means you do not need to wait for your relationships to become perfect or for your past mistakes to vanish. Before you can experience a soft heart, your environment does not need to be completely free of conflict for your mind to rest. The serenity you are seeking lies in the willingness to change your relationship with the friction itself. When an uncomfortable feeling rises in your chest, or when an honest boundary needs to be stated, you can allow yourself to feel the natural edge of that moment without immediately concluding that you are unsafe. You can let the water touch the stone, trusting that your awareness is vast enough to contain the movement without breaking. Let this understanding bring a sense of profound relief to your body right now. You can stop treating your own natural boundaries as if they were crimes against harmony. The exhaustion you feel is the signature of the dam, the physical consequence of keeping your life force locked behind a wall of compliance. You do not have to blame yourself for how long you have carried this protective wall, for it served you when the world felt too loud or unpredictable. But tonight, in the safety of this quiet room, you can gently recognize that the dam is no longer doing its job. It is not keeping you safe. It is simply keeping you dry, starving your roots of the very nourishment they need to grow. Now let this wisdom come closer to your own life. Look into the dark space of your mind and observe the thoughts that are currently demanding your attention. Notice how they try to convince you that if you do not solve every problem tonight, tomorrow will be a disaster. You can look directly at those anxious thoughts and realize that they are not absolute truths. They are just temporary configurations of sand moving through the channel. You do not have to obey them, and you do not have to fight them with a hammer. You can simply observe them with a quiet, compassionate eye, letting them reveal where the pressure is stored, without giving them the power to direct your breath. As you sink deeper into the comfort of your mattress, let the need to be the perfect helper dissolve into the night air. You are allowed to be a complex, fluid human being with your own needs, your own limits, and your own authentic voice. The universe does not require you to be a silent cushion for the rest of the world. At the cost of your own inner life, you can let the surface of the lake ripple. You can let the river touch the canyon walls, and you can let the truth be exactly what it is. The depth beneath you remains completely secure, untouched by the passing words or the silestones of the day. waiting to receive you as you drift toward rest. Let the quiet weight of the subterranean water remind you that your modern life is not separate from this internal geography. We often believe that these old parables belong only to silent mountains, remote monasteries, and ancient stonemasons who worked by candlelight. But the very same packed silt that choked the temple orchard is accumulating inside your chest during the ordinary hours of your day. You experience this whenever you glance at your glowing phone screen, staring at an unanswered message, feeling a sudden constriction in your chest while you wait for a validation that may never arrive. You feel it when you sit in a meeting or stand in your kitchen, nodding your head in polite agreement while your entire inside world is screaming in exhaustion. We spend our modern lives trying to sculpt a flawless, unproblematic digital reflection, acting as a constant shock absorber for the demands of our careers and our families, leaving our deep springs completely blocked beneath a pavement of survival habits. Think of how many times you have lied awake in the middle of the night, replaying a minor mistake you made hours or even years ago, turning a brief, clumsy phrase into a permanent crime against your own intelligence. You lie there beneath the dark ceiling, reviewing the words you should have uttered, constructing massive arguments in your mind that will never take place in reality. This internal rehearsal is just another handful of fine sand thrown into your own channel, an attempt to build a protective wall against the possibility of future rejection. We treat our relationships like fragile glass sculptures, believing that if we show our genuine weight, if we express a single boundaries or state a true preference, the entire structure will collapse around us. So we keep our smiles fixed, masking our heaviness with a performance of total availability, wondering why our bodies feel so profoundly older than our years. You might feel as though you are constantly falling behind in an invisible race, comparing your messy internal landscape with the manicured surface appearances of those around you. When the world tells you that you are not doing enough, or that your value is measured solely by how much friction you can absorb without complaining, the mind begins to treat rest as a dark failure. You sit down to rest, yet an internal judge begins to whisper that you have not earned the right to stop, forcing you to carry a subtle guilt even when you are trying to sleep. This guilt is the signature of the dam. It is the artificial rule that says your water must only move to turn the wheels of someone else's mill, and that your quiet, deep currents have no right to simply exist in the dark. But peace is not a distant reward that you receive only after you have perfectly repaired every broken relationship or answered every pending email. Zen wisdom reminds us that the unblocking of your life happens in the micro moments of your afternoon, in the tiny spaces between a challenge and your reaction. It begins when you receive a stressful message and choose to pause for one full inhalation before typing your reply, letting the initial wave of anxiety hit your canyon wall without letting it dictate your words. You are practicing the way of the water whenever you notice a self-punishing thought rising in your head and quietly choose not to obey its command. You can look at the fear that tells you to stretch yourself thin for the comfort of others and gently say to yourself, I am allowed to let this situation ripple without trying to freeze it. Caring for the people in your life does not mean you must convert your heart into a porous sponge that drinks in their dysregulation until you drown. You can love someone deeply without gripping their emotional weather so tightly that your own system loses its climate. When you state a small, honest boundary, you are not throwing a brick at their house. You are simply mapping the natural contour of your stone channel, so the water can flow cleanly between you. If their surface ripples because you said no, that is simply the natural movement of the river meeting a rock, not a sign that you have committed a sin. By allowing reality to be exactly what it is, you drop the exhausting labor of maintaining a false harmony, letting the clear mountain currents wash away the sand of old resentments before they turn into stone. Now let this understanding soften the way you treat your own current exhaustion. You do not need to earn your right to let your jaw drop open tonight, and you do not need to achieve a state of spiritual perfection before you are allowed to rest your bones. Your bed is not a reward for a productive day. It is a sanctuary where the world is completely forbidden from demanding your shape-shifting compliance. If you have spent today pretending to be okay while carrying a mountain of unspoken grief behind your eyes, you can stop the performance right now. You can let the heavy sand of that identity slide off your shoulders, allowing yourself to be a tired, unfinished, and fluid human being who has nothing left to prove to the darkness. We often think that letting go means we must achieve a massive, dramatic breakthrough, like shattering a stone wall with a giant hammer. But the transformation is always quieter, resembling the slow work of Omi's wooden tool in the foundation well. It is the daily practice of removing one tiny grain of calcified sand by allowing yourself to feel an uncomfortable truth without running from it. It is the choice to sit with the uncertainty of an unresolved situation, refusing to force a premature conclusion just to quiet your anxiety. Every time you allow your breath to move into the tightness of your throat without trying to force the tension to vanish, you are loosening the shelf of mud that has kept your spirit dry for so long. As the night deepens, let these modern anxieties lose their density, turning from solid rock into fine silt that can be carried away by the steady, unhurried movement of your respiration. The phone calls, the unread notifications, the opinions of others, and the heavy memories of what you wish you had said. They are all passing clouds reflected on the surface of your inner pool. They do not belong to the deep water underneath. You can let them drift across your consciousness without giving them the power to pack your channel. The space inside you is completely vast, capable of holding the natural friction of your modern life without letting it rot the foundations of your peace. Slowly, the noise of the day's obligations is retreating, leaving only the immediate reality of your quiet bedroom and the rhythmic movement of your ribcage. You have walked through another long day, absorbing the shocks, smoothing the paths, and carrying the weights for so many others. Now, the river has finally reached the shadow of the mountain, where it no longer needs to work, or run, or adapt to the hands of the farmers. You are safe enough to let the current slow down to a beautiful, dark stillness, trusting that the earth beneath your head will hold your entire existence while you prepare to cross the threshold into a deep, unobstructed rest. The subterranean current has found its rhythm now, moving beneath the limestone arches of your awareness with a slow, heavy grace. The world above the surface is fading into a distant memory, its long hours and complicated demands dissolving like fine sand in a vast, cool pool. You have arrived at the final threshold of the evening, a deep space where the architecture of your defenses is no longer required to stand. The night is folding itself completely around your room, bringing a deep, velvety weight that asks nothing from your thoughts and demands no answers from your voice. You can feel the profound solidity of the dark earth beneath you, a supportive presence that absorbs the remaining tension in your frame without asking for a single explanation. Let the rhythm of your body become slower, mimicking the patient drip of water in a hidden mountain sanctuary. Each inhalation is a cool breath entering a completely open valley, and each exhalation is a gentle release of the need to maintain an immaculate surface for the world outside. Your chest rises and falls with an effortless symmetry, a natural movement that requires no direction, no control, and no vigilance from your tired mind. The tightness that lived behind your collarbones has grown soft, losing its sharp edges, transforming into a wide, porous channel where air moves like a quiet breeze through ancient stones. You can feel the absolute weight of your legs, the deep sinking of your hips, and the complete relaxation of your hands as they rest motionless in the stillness. The ancient limestone gate of your resistance has opened wide, allowing the crowded, stagnant memories of the day to wash away into a boundless underground ocean that absorbs all sound. You do not have to carry the stones of your unspoken thoughts into the dark, and you do not have to plan the sentences you will speak when the morning comes. The people you tried to protect, the expectations you tried to smooth over, and the relationships you tried to manage are all resting in their own places, completely separate from this room. You have done enough for the world, you have absorbed enough of the friction, and tonight, you are granted absolute permission to return to the silence of your own deep well. The darkness here is not empty, it is full of a restorative, cool peace that flows beneath the foundation of everything you are. You can feel your forehead growing smooth, the tiny muscles around your eyes releasing their grip, and the heavy bone of your jaw dropping into a state of total unhindered ease. There is no performance left to sustain, no smile to wear, and no hidden wound to defend against the night. You are simply a hollow reed, a clear watercourse, an unblocked path through which the universe moves without meeting a single knot of resistance. The packed silt of old habits has dissolved into the dark currents, leaving only the pristine, spacious awareness that has been breathing quietly inside you since the very beginning. Let your consciousness drift now, moving downward like a single leaf floating on a slow subterranean river that knows exactly where it is going. The water does not hurry, it does not argue with the stone walls of the canyon, and it does not panic in the dark places where the sun cannot reach. It simply trusts the deep, invisible pull of the ocean, moving with a heavy, hypnotic rhythm that carries you closer to absolute rest with every passing breath. You are safe enough to drop the final remnants of your identity, safe enough to forget the roles you play, and safe enough to let the mind dissolve into the vast, dark expanse of a sleep that requires no justification. Something within you is already completely whole, untouched by the silences you kept, or the boundaries you struggled to name during the daylight hours. The deep springs are flowing clear and full, feeding your roots in the dark, restoring your spirit while your body rests in absolute stillness. The night is long, the space is uncritical, and the path ahead is entirely open. You can close your eyes completely, allowing the self-punishing voice of the judge to become nothing more than a faint murmur that is swallowed by the sound of the deep, rushing water below. And if the truth you have been exhausting yourself to hide was never a danger to your world, but the very stream that was meant to keep you alive,